Yes, again, Dr. Jimmy here with another chapter in Horror Nights history for Halloween Horror Nights 19, ripped from the silver screen. And in the recent videos, I had begun talking about scare zones. And I had got to a fourth scare zone, Lights, Camera, Hacktion, which had been located on Hollywood Boulevard. And having described the scare zone, I went on to describe an incident that occurred with a young man named Roberto. This can all be found in the preceding video, part 17. This is part 18. Now, continuing though, I had thought that what happened to Roberto could come back and get us because, you know, he was a little 13-year-old boy at the time, but in a few years he might be a big, strapping, 6'4", 250-pound athlete with a chainsaw of his own to chase us through the streets when he became a scare actor. That's a prophecy I made, but my prophecy proved to be incorrect because Roberto is in fact an actor, a real honest-to-God actor. One of those people who don't act because they want to, they act because they simply can't do anything else. It's a compulsion. They must be actors. And whenever I meet a person like this and they tell me of their calling for this craft, I tell them the same advice. And by that I mean meet someone here in Central Florida. I tell them, get out of here! And what I mean by that is get out of Orlando! Do not stay here! Do not go to work for Disney or Universal. God, no! Get your ass up and go to New York City. That's where you need to be to become a good actor. That's where you can learn to be an actor. That's where you can get the best work. Even if you spend your whole life only doing bit parts, it's better than doing it here, because that's what's important in the acting community. It's New York City. That's where you need to be. Or Hollywood. But New York if you're interested in legitimate theater. And so that's what I would have told him. And be prepared. Be prepared when you go there. Get a good pair of shoes because you're going to have to walk and walk and walk and go to audition after audition after audition and have thousands of doors slammed in your face over and over and over again and get rejected, and you have to be able to deal with that and still be hopeful and get that part when you get it, even if you're only off Broadway, even if you're doing Shakespeare in the parking lot. Still, you've got to do this if you're going to be a real actor. If you are an actor, that's what you must do. That's what I would have told Roberto back in the day if I'd known about his calling to this craft. I didn't know that. I didn't tell him that, but I would have told him that, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because that's what he did. And that's where he is now. He's no longer Roberto. He's no longer Bertz. His name is just Rob Morian. And he is an actor in New York City right now. And he's attending prestigious schools and learning his craft and doing very well. And I expect that someday, perhaps in a couple of years, when I take one of my frequent trips to the city, I may go to a Broadway show and, oh, there he is! Right up there on stage. I knew him when he was being chased through the streets of Hollywood Boulevard by chainsaws. Ha! Yes, I can expect that to happen, because I know that he's dedicated to his craft. I can tell by his posts, by his YouTube videos. Oh, and he sings a hell of a lot better than I ever will. Yes, very good, very talented. And he's turned into a very, very handsome young man indeed. So I'm very proud of Roberto and what he's done with his life, and expect to see good things from him in the future. So, as for now, about Lights, Camera, Hacktion, and in some way War of the Living Dead as well. I'm not certain which of these two scare zones it was, but it has been revealed after the fact that they had originally wanted to do a scare zone themed to Army of Darkness, and it might have been in this area on Hollywood Boulevard. It might have been in Shrek Alley. However, there were some rights issues with that, and they weren't able to secure that scare zone. They did do the scene in Silver Scream, as I mentioned before, again changing the name of the movie for the poster to Medieval Dead. But they had to jettison this They weren't going to have a chainsaw drill team this year at all. They were going to have Army of Darkness with Ash being the only chainsaw in the streets. But that didn't come to pass. As far as cinematic inspirations, obviously the whole lights, camera, Hacktion scare zone was themed to the movie's period and was, of course, inspired by any film with chainsaw lunatics, from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to any other film featuring chainsaws prominently. So there you go. Again, no direct. Now we come to the two remaining official scare zones, both of which were directly taken from motion pictures. One that was a full adaptation of one film, and the others which had many individual films incorporated together. And that's the one we're coming to next, the fifth scare zone of the event, the Horrorwood Die-In, which was located just past that Lights Camera Hacktion at the top of Hollywood Boulevard. In that space where last year Jack had his show, and the space where the year before, 2008, they had the Schoolhouse scare zone area. And it was that little area up at the top of the boulevard, which is, of course, surrounded by, on one side, you have the top of Hollywood Boulevard and Mel's Drive-In, the Pantages Theater, the Esoteric Gate, the La Bamba quick service restaurant, the path that goes through Central Park. This year, the scare zone did not extend into that park. The Schoolhouse did. The characters were roaming that park. This year, there was no scare zone in the park itself. Okay, but you did have on that side, and then of course on the other side you have the lagoon and the Regent's Park smoking area, all of that surrounding this area that became the Horrorwood Die-In. And following up on the Schoolhouse, they wanted to have a centerpiece type of a scare zone, in the same way that the Schoolhouse had been a centerpiece type of scare zone, sort of what Walt Disney used to call a wiener. You know, the idea that when you built a theme park, you wanted to have a visually striking thing up ahead of you, usually a very tall building, that's a wiener or a hot dog that attracts the person and causes them to go up toward it. Otherwise, they might just stay in Main Street, but they see the castle and, oh yeah, that's incredible, and they go up toward the castle. When they get there, then they're in the middle of the plaza. Oh, there's a castle here, there's a fort over here, there's a spaceship over there, oh my God. They got wieners on all directions. See, so the idea is there was a wiener that would take you out of Hacktion and bring you up to the middle, to the center of the park, to the heart of the event. And that was a huge drive-in cinema. Last year they had a drive-in cinema themed scare zone. Do not be mistaken, 2009's was bigger. You had a much larger screen. It was made out of fabric, like a real screen, not out of cardboard or whatever, or wood or anything. And it was big and huge, and it had projections, scenes from various horror movies, the famous "Let's all go to the lobby" little concession advertisement as well. Occasionally the usher would appear, and one brief appearance by Jack the Clown made people think it was a clue for the following year. Probably not. But this was here, and what was very interesting is it had a little slit near the bottom, which could allow scare actors to come out of the screen. So when there was a cast change, the scare actors literally emerged from the screen of the drive-in cinema itself. And of course, Mel's Drive-In, which of course the letters R and V are turned off, so it says Die-In, just like the scare zone Die-In. Mel's Drive-In is right there, and there are cars already there. They put in some more cars and all the little speakers attached to it, so it fit in perfectly. Hollywood Drive-In sign over on the boulevard, and a little concession stand. Unlike the one from last year, this one was open and there was somebody in the concession stand. We'll get to that in a minute. So here you have this wonderful setup, and the scare actors represented characters from all sorts of horror movies over the years. Classic, modern, most of which were Universal properties. There were a few exceptions. Harry Warner, the evil miner killer slasher from My Bloody Valentine, which was a Lionsgate property. He was in the concession stand. So when you go there to get your hot dog and soda and fries, fizzy drink, whatever, from the concession stand to see the movie, he's there with his pickaxe. And there are a lot of ladies who appeared to have some sort of a crush on the miner. They used to post on the internet about they're going to go and abuse a miner tonight. And they go there because they seem to find him hot for some reason, even though you can't even see his face. He's got that gas mask thing on. Maybe they thought Jensen Ackles was actually under there, I don't know. But they would go there, and it was quite funny to see that interaction. There was also all of the advertisements, all of the signage for the various products that could be purchased at the concession stand contained inside jokes with references to J. Michael Roddy and T.J. Manorino and other people who were involved in creating the event. So that was funny as well. And there were a couple other characters in the zone that weren't from Universal Productions. Nosferatu, which was public domain by that point, the original silent Nosferatu lurking through the, going back and forth in between automobiles. And I believe, what was the other one that wasn't? Oh yes, Regan McNeil, the little girl from The Exorcist, with green puke all caked on her white nightdress and on her face, her eyes glowing, the contact lenses, demonically possessed little girl. Ah, your mother sews socks in hell. That sort of thing. All of that going on, quite fun. But the majority of the characters were from Universal. Oh yeah, and one of the pig face minions of Jigsaw from Saw, of course, running around. But most of the other scare actors were characters from various Universal productions, including classic Universal monsters like Frankenstein and the Wolfman. In this case, Frankenstein was the Boris Karloff classic Frankenstein from the old days, not the creation of the damned version that was in the house. But the Wolfman seemed to be the same as the one in the house. There was also a few assorted random zombies, but Leo G. Caro was under a barrow when Tarantula took to the hills. Yes, Leo G. Caro's character from the movie Tarantula, his face all deformed by acromegaly and whatever it was, he was there. We had the character of Alma from Ghost Story, the film version of Peter Straub's novel. And this was kind of weird because it was sort of an outtake rather than the act. It wasn't the way she appeared. The horror face you saw in the movie was like a dead corpse face. The one that was from an outtake of a shock scene in the movie that got cut, but you might see it in one of the bonus features in a DVD or Blu-ray, or you might have seen it in photographs of this famous outtake in an old issue of Fangoria, of all things, where instead of having a frightful death face, she had, like, her mouth had taken up her whole face. So there were no eyes or nose or ears, just a face with hair, but then this horrible mouth that was the whole face with a big protruding tongue. Ah, scary horror face. The creature from that movie, Ghost Story. There was also the vengeful spirit, or whatever she was meant to be. There was also, let's see, one of my favorite characters who was just astounding. They had Tony Montana from Scarface in his white suit, black shirt, white tie, with his machine gun, say hello to my little friend, but dead, riddled with bullets, like he was somehow back from the dead. Not even a horror movie, it's a gangster movie, but they put that in there. It's a Universal picture, and that was quite amazing. And later on during the event, not at first, but in the later weeks of the event, they went even further, and the makeup people put a little bit of white powder right around here under his nose, like above his lip, like he'd been snorting that demon cocaine. And that was just quite amazing that they had such a scare actor in that zone. It was very impressive. So, and also the characters from The Strangers, the baby doll and the guy with the bag on his head, the other characters from Strangers. So all universe. Oh, and I mustn't forget, of course, Sylvia Ganush, the evil gypsy witch from Drag Me to Hell. I must not forget that, because especially as in one of the casts, she was played by my good friend Kim, and she really got into the character, and she had her false teeth, and she holding them, handing them out to people, and this was the witch who had put the curse, the whole Drag Me to Hell curse in the movie. Terrific, terrific performance by that scare actress. Just brava, loved it. So wonderful scare actors, and I can't think of this scare zone without thinking of my friend Liz, because Liz was just terrorized by the scare actors. Again, someone on the vault who was known to the scare actors, and they made a point of going after her when she was in the zone. And so she's there, and they're all coming on and going, Liz, Liz! And then she's on the ground, surrounded by them, on the ground, cowering, shrieking, while they're pounding over her. This got filmed by somebody and put on YouTube. It was also photographed and put up on the vault, so everyone saw it, whether they were there or not. Liz would later say it never happened, and whenever she proclaimed it never happened, of course, someone would put a link to the video or post the pictures, and then she would go, you know, PFFFTTT or whatever. That was her response to anything she didn't like. The whole time, however, it's hysterically funny. Her daughter is standing there, teenage girl, like this, just, Mom, you're embarrassing me, that kind of look, because she wasn't scared. So it was always great fun. And of course, this zone, of course, featured numerous characters from many different actual IPs. The sixth and final, not really, but the sixth scare zone, the final one mentioned in the brochure, the final official six sensational scare zones, was oh, I'm sorry, direct IP. A direct IP. It was Cirque du Freak, the Vampire's Assistant, an IP scare zone based specifically on a specific film, which in turn is based on a series of novels by a fellow named Darren Shan. It's not even his real name. His real name is O'Shaughnessy, but he writes as if he is the character in the book, writing these books himself and publishing them. The film was released by Universal that year, and it was featured for the so-called opening moment, well, not opening moment, but opening ceremony, where they had on the first night, on the opening night, they had some of the actors from the film being interviewed outside of the park main gate before it opened for the event. So there was sort of a little press media sort of interview thing going on. That was the closest thing to an opening ceremony that year. The scare zone itself was located on the other side of Central Park, near the entrance of Kid Zone, and that little tiny courtyard area just outside of Central Park. And to the left is the path that goes into Kid Zone. To the right is the path that goes to Kid Zone when you come out of Central Park. To the left is the path that today goes into Springfield, USA, but at that time goes into what was known as the International Food Festival area, mainly because it was going toward World Expo, and there were some flags of different nations on flagpoles, and there was a big food service area that had supposed to be international foods, but it was really quite awful. I'm glad they replaced that with Springfield. And it didn't extend into either of those areas at all. So unlike the previous year's Fractured Tales, which went from there all the way into Kid Zone, all the way to the queue areas for the two houses in that area, this time it was just in that little courtyard between the Animal Actors stage, between the Animal Actors Theatre and Central Park, that little tiny space, and that was all that was the scare zone, which made it a bit cramped, especially since they packed so much into that little space. They turned this into street theatre. They recreated a circus camp. You had tents for the performers to live in. You had caravans, the trailers, the sort of gypsy caravan type things. You had little stages set up, and all of the characters that had been in the film itself were there. When you came up Central Park, they didn't have any scare actors in the park, really, but they did bring back all those jack-o'-lanterns from the previous year. So you went through this long path of jack-o'-lanterns in the trees glowing quite beautifully, and then just before you get to the scare zone, on one side, there's this sort of portly, bald gentleman in a tuxedo who starts heckling you and mocking you and making fun of you. That's Mr. Tiny from the film, sort of sitting on a tombstone or something, whatever he's sitting on. So that's the Mr. Tiny character, and that introduces the zone as you go into it. But when you go into it, you have all of this character. You have the vampire himself, who's a magician, and his little pet spider, quite delightful. You have the bearded lady, you have the lizard boy, you have the guy with two bellies, the guy with the big nose, you have some characters on stilts. The Siamese twin girls were on stilts. How they did that, I'm not sure. You also had the big, tall ringmaster fellow who's on stilts. All of these, I don't remember the names of all the characters. It's been a long time since I read the book or saw the movie. I do have it over there somewhere in my bookcase, but I'm not going to go over and pull it out to get the names. You didn't have Darren Shan himself, the boy who becomes a vampire assistant. He was not there. You did have the evil vampanese, though, and they were running about scaring people, and also the little diminutive minions of Mr. Tiny, who looked a lot like Jawas in little black hoods, like little dwarves in black hoods. Little people portrayed these characters. And what's cool is you're distracted by all this stuff you see. There's so much to look at, and almost little mini shows going on with the various freaks and performers in this Cirque du Freak. And you're enjoying all of that. And you don't know it because there's a little person in a black robe coming up behind you in a hood, or coming up just beneath your waistline. You don't even see them until they're right on you, and rah! And all of a sudden, holy fuck, you're scared. And that's how it worked. Very delightful. This scare zone was also the location of the Rat Lady. They put the Rat Lady into a specific scare zone, theming her to the scare zone itself. So she had her glass coffin done in carnival-esque style, with some big, beefy strongmen as her attendants, and she was in there with all her rats, dressed in a gypsy costume with a gypsy handkerchief, babushka sort of thing. But they decided to make her a circus freak herself, so they made her literally into a rat lady, as she had a little nose, like a rat face, with little whiskers, little nose. So she was literally a rat lady that year. But what was funny is the makeup made her look for all the world like one of the Who's from Whoville they have at Grinchmas every year at Islands of Adventure. So it was like, oh look, the rat lady is a Who. We laughed about that year. But you know, she wouldn't be there every time we went through the scare zone, because they have to take breaks for the rat lady, and the rats need to take a break, obviously. But she was there most of the time, and you could see the rat lady permanently not moving around, not going in the streets so much, but here in that scare zone, just like the Chainsaw Drill Team had their own scare zone that year. And so that wraps up the 6 official scare zones of the event. But was that all the scare zones they had that year? Wait till part 19.